Hello, everyone. Wish you have an enjoyable lunchtime. In the next 30 minutes that I'm going to share with you about what can an international telco teach you about China. Before I do that, let me introduce myself. My name is Sai-Ping Song. People usually call me Sai-Ping. Indeed, as a network guy, I love this name a lot because ping, P-I-N-G, ping, everybody loves here means that, ping is an important tool to validate the connectivity. Like myself, I'm the important tools to ensure the connectivity is okay for everybody. Indeed, myself, I've been working for an international telco, Telstra, for the last 20 years. In the first 16 years, I've been helping the company to manage the international network, which is AS4637, which I believe that I met some of you that we have do peerings before. And then around 4 to 5 years ago, Telstra acquired PetNet, and at that time that we also acquired a joint venture company in China, which is Telstra PBS. And that's why I moved over there to work for Telstra PBS, which I've helped the company to rebuild the domestic network there. So that's why here you see there's another AS number, AS37965, and the other one 55988. So indeed, for myself, I graduated in the US. So this place, US, is not new to me. I'm based in Hong Kong. So that's why I would like to, based on my international experience and also my current experience in China, to talk about how we can build network in China. Before we do so, I guess everybody, when you want to route traffic or connect to the content in China, that you always encounter issues like long latency, and also all the traffic traversing into China need to go through the Great Firewall. So the performance is not that good. As a workaround, that a lot of people will put your infrastructures near China, which means that you will put your infrastructure in the DC in, let's say, Tokyo in Japan, Hong Kong, or Singapore. And then you also need to subscribe the service on your ISP with direct China option. Then you can lower your latency. However, the drawback is the cost is relatively high, and also still encounter the potential congestion issue at the Great Firewall, plus the quality is still vary a bit. So in order to tackle the problem, you need to build your network inside the firewall. Before you can build a network, there are a few things you need to consider. So here I summarize my experience that there are a few built-in blocks that you need to follow. First of all, you need to acquire the appropriate license with the regulatory compliance. Once you have the correct license, then next step, you can start to think about building your infrastructure. Building infrastructure in China is not that straightforward. I remember when I first rebuilt the network, the first stage that I spent a lot of time there is doing some bidding process because you want to find the lowest cost. One common thing in China is that it's not that easy to go direct. For example, if you want to buy out equipment from a particular vendor, you need to go through distributor. When you go through distributor, then you need to ensure that the product or the equipment you buy is the real product, not counterfeit. So that's why I spend a lot of time to validate what I'm going to purchase, and then after the purchase, that whether those devices are the ones that are valid, and then we start the infrastructure build. So after you build the infrastructure, then you need to think about the connectivities, because if you don't have the connectivity, otherwise that you will end up with an island, that you have your DC there and then connect to nowhere. So that's why the next step is to find an eligible service provider to bring you the domestic plus the international capacities. So once you figure this out and all those connect, then you start your business. And the business that you run, you need to have the regular compliance check because of the environment in China that, like the license that we are having, is in general, you need to renew on yearly basis. So that's why you need to have a regular check. As you know, China is a country that a lot of things are government driven. So that's why you need to be prepared for the frequent change in government policy. So these are the few factors that you need to consider when you build the network inside China. As a service provider or internet and also cloud provider, a few things that you need to be mindful in terms of the challenge. First of all is the internet bandwidth. It's not straightforward that if you have the money, then you can buy whatever thing you can. It's not the case. It's quite complicated when you purchase bandwidth from the incumbent. And the other things you need to ensure is the IP addresses that you are using to route traffic must be registered under the China NIC, not APNIC, not ARIN. The other challenge is regarding the data center resources that when you select where you put your device, you need to ensure that your data center is having scalable enough to cope with your network expansion. Because you don't want to end up with you build a POP there and then less than a year that because of some unsatisfactory stuff that you need to move. So you definitely want to avoid that. So that's why you need to build a long-term strategic relationship with your local partner. And the third thing about license, well, in China, I think similar to any other countries that you operate business, you need to obtain the appropriate license. One thing to remember is when you do business in China, you will build the customers in local currency, which means that renminbi, you need a license to build the customers in renminbi. So this is something that is important that a lot of people will miss it. And certainly the regulatory compliance due to the frequent change in the government policy is something that you need to be mindful. And then the internet content provider registration is another thing that need to be mindful because it will be required by end customers to open port 80 because in China, port 80 is closed by default. So there's some procedures you need to follow. Otherwise, that you won't be able to get the registration done. And last but not least is the local relationship and experience that because you need to have a good partner, local partner there to help you to drive the successful implementations of your services in China. Before I jump deeper into the regulatory, in China, to make it simple, the Chinese government is, we can consider the top level is the National People Congress. We call it an NPC. And then underneath is the State Council. And then underneath the State Council is the MRIT, which you probably have heard about it, which is the Ministry of Industry and Information Technologies. So all these three different levels of government bodies will impose different levels of regulatories. For example, like as a service provider, that the State Council will impose like the telecommunication law in China and the regulatory on internet informations. Whereas for the MRIT, that they will impose the regulations on telecommunication business license and also the regulation on internet domain and also the internet management. Well, these are the names that I do the translation into some readable English because all these regulations are only written in Chinese. But here I just want to give you an idea what that talk about, what are the key things that you need to be mindful. And as the general business operation compliance, there are a few things that imposed by the National People Congress, like the cybersecurity law and the guiding state secrets. And then on the State Council, they also have the regulations on computer information and also the safety protection. The safety protection here is the well-known as the data sovereignty things that in China that there's a rules that talking about all the customer sensitive information must be kept inside China. You cannot export it outside China. Having said that, there's no clear definition of what it means by sensitive customer information. So that's why you need to have somebody who are familiar with the local laws, that you don't fall into the trap that, well, you will not be able to renew your license even if you have got it. So let me go into a little bit deep dive into the security, information security there. So as everybody knows, internet traffic in China is subject to many rules and regulations. And then the content, if that's deemed undesirable or illegal, will be removed, which will be removed very quick. I remember under some circumstances that because there are some important government meetings, the government require all the local ISP to shut down any website within 1 minute after they announce to all those ISP. So you can imagine how quickly that we need to adapt to the changing environment and what the government imposed. And as I said before, port 80 is closed by default. So business who need to have a web server, then they need to apply for the opening of port 80. The way that you do, you need to follow some procedures. You need to submit ICP, the Internet Content Provider Registration. Here I talk about registration, not license, to the authorities. Talking about saying that the service that you use the port 80 will be used for what. And if you have like mail server, domain name server, then you need to register separately. In terms of the ICP stuff, there are two levels. The first one, the easier one, is the ICP filling. That for the end user who hosts web services in China, that you need to do the ICP filling, talking about the port that you're using, like port 80 for HTTP and then 44.3 for HTTPS. And then if your content contain some information like regarding news, movies, culture, television, that broadcasting, then you need to have another formal approval. And if the operation website that you are running that have some contain commercial content, such as if you want to run online shopping, trading, and gaming, then you need to apply. In this case, you need to apply the ICP license. And unfortunately, at the moment, the foreign companies are not able to acquire ICP. Only a few foreign JV, joint venture, can apply it, but it's still very difficult in practice. So as a cloud service provider, if you want to expand your business in China, that you need to identify a good partner. Before you do that, you also need to understand what sorts of roles that you have to do. Certainly, you need to provide your own design, your requirement on the data center, and also the hardware, the infrastructure that you built, and then the software certainly is running is by you. And the fourth thing is about you need to follow some very specific DC operation process. Just to share with everybody here that from my experience, a lot of DC in China, that when you ask for remote hand services, since most of the people can only speak Chinese or Mandarin, they will ask you for translation. If you give them English, written in English, remote hand request, then they probably won't well, take care of it because they need Chinese to interpret. So that's why you need to ensure you have somebody who can do the translation for you to proceed your work. Otherwise, you get stuck in the middle. And the last one is certainly you need to also implement your own customer data security policy at the DC. One thing about the partner you select, why is this so important is that because you need your partner to deal with the government. The government always have a lot of new policy or some sudden requirement. Then if you are not aware or familiarized with the local laws, then you don't know how to deal with it. So you need to rely on your partner to do so. And the other things about the license, that even if you got the license, you need somebody to help you to renew your license, as the license is kind of like on a yearly basis. And from time to time, there are a lot of people will probably go to inspect you, then you need somebody to take care of it. And then apart from the government relationship, the other things about how you deal with your customers. As I mentioned before, in China, because you build your customers in local currency, renminbi, so you have to ensure that your partners, you have the license to do the contract and build the customers. And lastly, about the connectivities, that you need to ensure that the data center that you pick is able to provide you the necessary service provider or the connectivities that go into your DC. So before we jump to the network piece, let me give you a brief China Network 101 class. Back in early 2000, in China, that they split into three key incumbents. China Unicom, that they are predominantly managing the North China. The demarcation point is north of Shanghai. And then south of Shanghai will be China Telecom. And then China Mobile, by its name, is managed the entire mobile network in China. And then the Great Firewall we spoke about before, that in China, that there are three international gateways that putting the Great Firewall. That will be Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou. Those that will be from north, and then east, and then south. And the locations of the Great Firewall is putting in the middle between the cable landing stations and the routers at the internet exchange point, which means that forever traffic exchange in and out of China, that will need to filter by this Great Firewall. So when you set up internet platform inside China, it's a bit tricky, I would say, because if you need to buy internet services from the domestic service provider, you may always heard about the name static BGP. This is where kind of tricky here is when I first heard about this word. But BGP already from international term is talking about something dynamic. But how come there's a word static in front? It's kind of contradicting. But if you are able to digest the diagram I put it here, you will understand why. You will look from the top that this is the normal BGP session that you set that up or build it with the incumbent through the international gateway. And then underneath those incumbents, they are also connected to each other through BGP. However, the capacities among them will be quite limited. So that's why you will always encounter packet loss or high latency when the traffic transfers from one platform, one carrier to another carrier. So that's why as domestic service provider, you need to connect to all three of them. The way that we exchange route is that those incumbents indeed are just sending you static route. Or in some cases, if you have good relationship, then you're able to get some partial BGP routes that send from the incumbent. However, on the reverse directions, for the service provider, that you can exchange your routes sending to the incumbent. But that's the way that the construct is indeed, you can imagine, it's just purely static routing. So as general customers, when you buy service from the domestic internet service provider, then you just simply connect to them and then they will just send you a default route. So this is kind of a mix of, on the upstream side with BGP, but then indeed you are subscribing service using static. So how they call the static BGP route, they always have is in mainland China. So if I look at it from the ASPARP perspective, since the route that you have are not indeed announced by you. This will be announced by your upstream, that is incumbent. When I say incumbent here is that even within different, the three incumbent, that they always have some other AS connecting to them in each province. So the way that the announcement will do is they will announce under those sub-AS and then through the incumbent AS to the global internet. So that's why when you, on the looking glass, when you do show IP BGP, and you only can see the AS path of the incumbent and the downstream. You will never able to see your own AS path. One thing I want to highlight here is that the IP addresses that you are using must be registered under China NIC. If it's not under China NIC, then the IP address cannot be broadcast within China. So here I like to do a little comparison about the routing inside China and the rest of the world. So in China, predominantly will be static routing, whereas outside China will be like the normal BGP dynamic routing. The network routes that announced to the public internet will be under the incumbent AS rather than your own AS. As I mentioned before, all the network routes must be registered under China NIC. And one key thing is that in China, there's no settlement-free peering. Everything will need to pay, whereas internationally that, we can form BGP peering anywhere depending on the commercial construct. So that's why BGP peering is kind of highly restricted in China, whereas in the outside world, then BGP peering is highly market-driven. So the last thing I want to talk about here is just the conclusion about, although there are a lot of compliance, regulatory things that you need to follow, running internet business is still feasible as long as you find the appropriate partners to help you to follow the compliance. And also, you need to be flexible and stay alert to the frequent changes in the regulatory requirement. And if you need to buy transit or upstream services in China, static BGP is the default option. So don't be scared next time if you heard about this word, static BGP, that how come static and BGP work together? But this is norm, so you need to understand this. And then if you want to have a better connectivity, then you need to ensure that you have multiple connection to different incumbent. Or you can look at your service provider, whether they have this kind of multiple connectivities. And last but not least, as a network designer, that it's pretty important to build redundancy in your network design. Don't have the wrong assumptions. So that's pretty much what I want to share with everyone based on my past experience. I believe I still have time for Q&A sessions. So I'm open the floor for any questions.
Well, I was curious about VPN services, if we need to connect back.
Yep, VPN, certainly VPN is another typical service that a lot of people buying from China, which require another separate license. So what I'm talking about today is focusing on the internet platform. VPN, they will follow the similar regulatory requirement, but they are on a separate set of license that you require. So VPN services is certainly available in China, but you need to ensure that when you buy it, your service provider is having that appropriate license. And the license that I mentioned is because in China that the license they are granted to a particular province. Some of them may have the national-wide license, but you need to check against what your service provider is having. Otherwise, for some day, if you subscribe unlicensed services, then your service will get shut down immediately.
Did you mean VPN like MPLS VPN or VPN like SSL?
IPsec VPN, yes.
Maybe ask a question again, because he answered a different question.
Was it, I was speaking of IPsec VPN.
Oh, IPsec is another one. That IPsec, I believe you are talking about running IPsec through the public internet.
Yes.
Officially, that is legal within China, the domestic China, which means that according to the law, that your IPsec will need to terminate at the gateway inside China.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Chris Morrow, Google. I have sort of a regular operations question dealing with, this better? Okay. Dealing with the remote provider in China, both for things deployed inside the PRC and things that cross the border, is sometimes challenging, at least for me. And I wonder if that's just language-specific problems or expectations. How would you normally troubleshoot link problems or traffic problems?
Pretty good questions. There are a lot of foreign telco always ask me about this. Well, when you find some interesting routing, when the traffic probably across the border, then a lot of chances that it will be filtered by the Great Firewall. But you'll never be able to have a definite answer. But that's from what we observe. If you have some miscellaneous, well, some packets or some traffic that the government may not want, then you will get discarded.
Okay, that part I get. The US government turns off lots of common net zones all the time. Subzones, I guess. My question really is, like, for a deployment inside the PRC, we've had instances of large volumes of traffic arriving, and the provider has no ability, in quotes, to tell us what's going on or fix it.
But
in particular, like, I know there's an Arbor deployment in that network, so pretty sure they could figure it out.
well, I believe you are talking about some denial of service attack. That
Yes.
Okay. Well, indeed, those incumbents that they do have this capability, and indeed, is also some services that you can buy to have this kind of DDoS filtering. So, I guess one of the reasons that sometimes your transit cannot be doing that is because of the static routing that I just mentioned before, that they don't have too much flexibility to reroute the traffic, and after they identify the denial of service attack.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Okay. Then thanks a lot for your time.